Real quick, ladies and gentlemen, which I hope my phone is on silent, but please, if you can, have your phones on silent. And I say that hoping that no one texts. I can't remember if mine is on silent. Also, real quick, we're going to ask that while people up here doing, presenting their stories as storytellers, that please do not interrupt them or, wait until the end for applause or whatever. Appropriate reaction is fine. If it's something's funny, obviously laugh. If it scares the shit out of you, you get But otherwise, we don't want to have any sort of commentary during the whole thing. Real quick, I just want to say thank you for myself for coming out. I can proudly take credit on this one for pitching the idea. There are a couple this year on the events that I pitched. One of them was Day of the Dark Ones, and I loved pitching it. She said, do you really think that people are going to be into Lilith and Hecate and all these darker gods? And I said, yeah, I think so. And fortunately, it turned out so well. In fact, if you saw the poster on the window, Day of the Dark Ones is going to be happening again in 2026. This was one of the other ones I pitched. I said, what about bringing back some ghost stories? And same thing. You think people are going to come out for it? Well, you can clearly see the room is jam-packed. It looks like a mosh pit in here. And so this is fantastic, and thank you so much for coming out. So, without further ado, I'm going to hand this to you,
Okay.
Priestess Renée.
All right. Okay, real quick, we do have some hot chocolate up here. We also have something to spike it with, if you'd like. We've got all kinds of treats. Help yourself. Please just don't do it while people are speaking. You can do it in between or whatever. Okay. So, tonight we are going to start with Mr. Steve Nosack. back there, look around. Steve is part of the Midnight Signal podcast. If you're not familiar with it, you're going to want to check it out. He's on YouTube, and it's live every Friday night.
Every Friday night, 6 p.m.
Okay, here you go.
Thank you. All right, my stories are going to be really quick this evening. They're just 3 Christmas ghost stories that I found from here in Dutchess County. They date back all the way to the 1600s, and the last story is around the 1800s. So the first one is, I know what it is. Oh, the Fishkill Church. Early Dutch settlers came in. When they came into Fishkill and started building their communities down there, the one thing they made sure they brought with them was a church bell. Back then, a church meant community. So they had this church bell brought in. They built a church around it. And from that point, the city started to grow. One Christmas Eve, a family was returning to their house, a husband, a wife, and 2 children, and they came across a really bad storm, and they never made it into Fishkill. What they used to do back then was they would ring the church bell every hour just to give people a direction of where they needed to go. Unfortunately, at the time, the church bell was frozen. They couldn't get it to move. So this family never made it to Fishkill, and when the storm cleared, they found their wagon had been tipped over, blood was everywhere, and they ended up finding the bodies. Well, a year later, at midnight on Christmas Eve, the church bell rang. There's only one problem with that. The church had burned down in the summer. Ooh. The weird part about this story, for almost 100 years, every Christmas Eve at midnight, the church bell would ring one time. The bell wasn't even there anymore. They had sold the bell to somebody further up north. But to this day, if it's really quiet down in Fishkill, every once in a while you will hear a story of somebody hearing the bell chiming at midnight. So this is one I haven't been able to verify. I want to do some more research on it, but it was stories that have been passed down, and they made it to the internet. So if it's on the internet, it must be true. All right, the second story is the Wappinger Falls Widow. And the Wappinger Falls widow was married to a fisherman. Fisherman went out the day before Christmas Eve to go out and catch some fish and make some money. He never returned. The wife was at home and she waited and waited. The next day rolled around, still nothing. So she went out looking, and on Christmas Eve, she never returned. There are stories today, if you go down along the Hudson River, you will see a woman dressed in all black walking out towards the river. People have followed her out there, and as soon as she gets to the Hudson River, she disappears. Nobody knows who she was. Nobody has a name. It's not been reported anywhere. But it goes on to this day, where people will still see the woman in black going out to the river to look for her husband to celebrate Christmas. The last one is kind of a true one that I think has been embellished a little bit, but I like it. It is the Stormville School. Stormville had just a one-room school back in the 1800s, and on a Christmas day, the teacher was preparing lessons for when the students returned. And she had written on the blackboard, "Merry Christmas, don't be late." She was never seen again after that. They don't know if she passed away somewhere in the woods heading home. What had happened? They never found her. She never made it home. Nobody ever heard from her again. Unfortunately, the school did burn down around the 1930s, 1940s. But in that time, the people that were taking care of the school would come in, and somebody had written on the blackboard, "Merry Christmas, don't be late." There's never any chalk in the room. The room had been completely cleaned out, but for several years, that message kept appearing over and over every Christmas day. So, those are my 3 stories that I found here in Dutchess County.
All right, thank you, Steve. That was fantastic. Okay, next up, we have Karen Millman.
Sorry. This may or may not be true, since I wrote it myself.
Then it's true.
Okay. This is about Retribution, the red-eyed reindeer. With his all-seeing red eyes glowing in the darkness of his stall, while the others are playing reindeer games, he's focusing on the well-being of animals, one and all. He sees all the humans who have not cared for animals, including their pets, who have abused and neglected them and not taken them to the vet. If you've hurt an animal in the wild, his revenge won't be mild. Or an animal on a farm, you'll know the meaning of fear and harm. Or an animal who has trusted you as a pet, just wait and see what you get. Santa, you're not exempt for excluding Rudolph for being different. Not letting him play with the others, you too will pay, motherfucker. As Christmas Eve night falls, in his black coat he emerges, as his eyes turn to flames and his power surges. The smoke rises from his breath as his eyes glow a fiery blaze, and all the terrible misdeeds come through the haze. He sees you when you're sleeping. He knows when you're awake. So be aware, animal abusers, on Christmas Eve night, your life he will take. When you hear the thundering hoofbeats and you feel the bone-chilling fear, know it's already too late. Retribution, the red-eyed reindeer, is here. Thank you.
All right, next up, we have Bob Johnson. Don't sit down.
Oh, I just. Too old. How do all these people get in my room? It's an old Dean Martin. For all of you who have pets, this is a true story. And then we didn't coordinate the pet thing, Karen and I. So this is a true story. About 7 years ago, when my wife was still alive, love your dog, we had a little Yorkie dog named Dino, a really great little puppy. And Dino was so attached to Dola, it wasn't even fun. I mean, this was her right arm. She used to carry him around in a van, take him to the movies, take him everywhere. Dino was in there, and you wouldn't even know, what's in that bag? Dino. Okay.
Angry person.
Angry person, right, exactly. So Dino got very sick. He was old. He was 17 years old. He got very ill. We took him to the vet a number of times, to Arlington Animal Hospital. Dr. Standis, I don't know if you know who he is, but he's actually Rune, his name is Rune Standis. So he's also very much into the occult, and he kind of knows this stuff.
He wears a Thor's hammer.
That's right, he wears a Thor's hammer. And he became friendly with us, and he took care of Dino all this time. So that's the backstory. Here's the spooky part of this whole thing. When Dino became very ill, we started giving him the meds every day to calm him down. I forget exactly what they were called, but he would get these meds every day and would just sleep on the sofa. And Doll was very upset. We both were, for many months, because our poor little dog was ill. Where am I waiting? Yes, ma'am.
You're being blinded. Sorry.
Okay. So Dino was very ill, and we didn't know what to do with him. Whether to put him down, keep him. I mean, this went on for a couple of months, 3 months, and we were just heartsick over this poor little dog's condition. So I went to Hyde Park for a business meeting one day, and in a building in Hyde Park, and I'm outside waiting because the person I had the appointment with wasn't ready. So I'm waiting outside. It was a nice warm day, and a woman comes walking by with a Yorkie. Okay? And I said, we have a dog just like that. She goes, oh yeah, this is Bruiser. I said, Bruiser? For a little tiny Yorkie. I said, okay, I'll buy that. And I said, can I ask you a question? I said, what would you do if your dog got really ill? She said, well, you have to really understand that dogs' lives are short. They're short. So to put them through pain and operations and suffering, it's really not humane. So she said to me, just, think about it, but the best thing to do is just let him go and let him die in peace. Okay? Her name was Grace. I said, thank you, Grace. And I turned to see if the door and to see if it was open. It wasn't open. I turned back. Grace is gone. Okay? She walked across the street. I don't know where she went. She got lost in the crowd. Grace is gone. All right. So I get home that night, excuse me, and I say to my wife, I think it's time that we let Dino go. She goes, I don't want to do it. I said, look, it's really the right thing. He's just suffering here. We're giving him meds every day. He's just sleeping all day. The poor thing is not living anymore. He was a fun little dog. He was 17 years old. So we said, okay. Next morning, we go to Arlington Animal Hospital, see Dr. Standis. We'd had the appointment to put Dino down. And I'm talking to Dr. Standis. And I said, we've decided to do this. He goes, I met someone and we were talking about it and it sounded like the right thing to do. And he goes, yes, it probably is in his condition. So before we actually gave him the injection, excuse me, but this is a little painful for me still. Before we gave him the injection, I started talking to him, and I said, do you have many patients, many animals that are in this state? I said, particularly, little dogs like this. And he says, oh yeah. He goes, I have many. He said, I said, okay, let's just do it. So we put Dino down, and of course we cried. And I'm talking to Dr. Stay on this, and I'm saying, the funny thing is, I was talking to a woman in Hyde Park the other day who had a dog that looked just like Dino. His name was Bruiser. And he said, oh, yeah, really? He goes, we have a lot of patients from Hyde Park. He said, well, do you remember who it was? And I said, yeah, it was this woman, Grace. I said, she had these big black glasses on. He goes, Grace with the big black glasses? I said, yeah. He goes, with Bruiser. Right. He said, when did you see her? I said, 3 days ago. He said, Grace has been dead for 3 years.
What?
True story. I said, no. I said, I just saw her. I said, she's a little woman, blondish brown hair with big black glasses. He goes, yeah, that's Grace. He goes, she was my patient for 3 years ago. I put Bruiser down in this very room. True story.
Oh, man.
Awesome. All right, we have beautiful Sarah Sinistre next.
Thank you. The fuzzy microphone is now mine. So I'm not much of a ghost story person, but I love true crime. Like, I devour it. My YouTube is basically a dumpster fire of just the most horrific true crime channels. You? Okay. Anybody else? You? Yeah.
Got about 5 on Zoom.
Don't, not yet. I can't admit it.
But she's willing to learn.
There you go.
You're safe.
I am. All right, so we have a tradition here for Yule tales. They've been told on dark December nights for millennia. Stories told from our human history for so long, the tradition predates the written word. In the dark depths of the turning of the year, humans have gathered around the flames, seeking what little light and warmth we can while the fire stays lit. But always with the knowledge that even around the cheerful holiday lights, darkness waits. We're never more than steps away from the cold, dark night. Some storytellers tonight speak about moments that made the hair on the back of their necks stand up, when the sounds of everyday life fades to murmurs and suddenly the loudest sound is footsteps trying not to be heard. Today, my tale isn't personal experience. It isn't drawn from history either. Tonight, I share the horror of modern time. A tale that could have happened today or tomorrow. A story from 2013. In the time of elevators and security cameras, computers and cell phones. All the talismans of our modern life still couldn't stop the dark winter's tale of a troubled young woman and a haunted hotel. This is the story of Elisa Lamb. Anybody familiar with her story? Okay. In 2013, Elisa Lamb was a 21-year-old Canadian college student. That winter break, she visited California and eventually came to Los Angeles and stayed at the Cecil Hotel. A word about the hotel itself. For the Cecil Hotel, stories of darkness are nothing new. It sits, a fading grande dame at the end of her reign, nestled in Skid Row, wearing the lives of street people. Those lost to addiction and poverty instead of the rock stars and glamorous Hollywood elite that once called the Cecil home since its doors opened in 1924. I could spend my entire presentation's time on the Cecil Hotel, now itself finally laid to rest. The hotel has had more than its share of sad stories over the years. For some reason, the Cecil is a place that gathers tragic moments. Over its decades-long lifetime, it's housed at least 2 serial killers. Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, and Austrian serial killer Jack Unterweger, a prolific modern murderer. He came to the US in 1991 just to stay at the Cecil. He killed 3 women during his stay. The Cecil was reported as one of the last places the Black Dahlia stayed before her death. A manager of the Cecil from 2007 to 2017, Amy Price, recorded over 80 deaths in the hotel during the time she worked there. Even the most cynical of skeptics, among which I count myself, would seem to agree that place has a strange hold on people. And Elisa Lamb came to stay there during a time of the year when the veils are thinnest. She never left. The official death certificate for this young woman lists accidental drowning as the cause of death. But as of January 2013, nobody knew this yet. During her stay that winter, Elisa's behavior became increasingly unusual, and many internet sleuths have suggested she was under the influence of illicit substances. But the toxicology report recorded no evidence of substance abuse, and no drugs were found in her system at the time of death. So how do we explain the events leading up to Elisa's death? How do we explain away that she was found floating nude, locked away inside one of the hotel's rooftop water supply tanks, her clothing drifting nearby? Because it's a mystery that was captured on camera, recorded in hotel logs, and a haunting that was witnessed by many. A lost girl who wasn't swallowed up by the streets of Skid Row, who was beloved by her family and indeed kept in touch with them during her time in California. Other hotel guests described Elisa to CNN as outgoing, very lively, very friendly. Yet, hotel guests also found notes from Elisa left on room walls and on guest beds, warning them to get out, go home, get away. After a couple days, hotel staff moved Elisa from her shared room to a private one, something she seemed to need. And on January 31st, Elisa went to a bookstore and a cafe, but her erratic behavior started to become more pronounced as the day wore on. Elisa is recorded dashing through the lobby, shouting, "I may be crazy, but so is LA!" At one point, hotel staff had to remove her from an area marked staff only, and her wanderings were also recorded in the elevator, where silent footage exists today, clearly showing Elisa animatedly talking to someone just off camera, showing her turning to nobody in the empty space beside her in the stopped elevator, showing her standing in the open elevator doors, gesturing, hands moving lyrically, then agitated. As the security cameras shift perspective, it is revealed that there is indeed nobody else in view. Elisa is apparently alone, although the conversation becomes an argument. The cameras continue to do their lonely job, and we watch too, our own heads full of questions that remain unanswered to this day. There is a sense of danger as you watch, that someone will step into frame and suddenly it will all make sense. But the entity Elisa is talking to is never revealed. Who was she fleeing from? Did she know already that she was doomed? That footage is the last we see of Elisa, that lonesome elevator footage. Her parents, who called Elisa daily, she called them, I believe, they waited all that last day of January to hear her voice, as always, but she didn't call. She didn't call the next day either, nor did she check out of the hotel as she'd planned to. She never arrived in Santa Cruz, her next stop on her sightseeing trip. Her family wasted no time contacting the hotel and the police. Investigators arrived to find a room already cleared by housekeeping. Elisa's belongings all accounted for, even her computer left behind. Instead of finding Elisa, hotel guests began having eerie experiences. New guests who arrived after Elisa's stay began reporting strange occurrences. Water would flow from the tap and then stop on a whim. Water pressure was low, an annoyance but hardly on par with something as serious as the disappearance of a young college student. So mild complaints continued. Sometimes the faucet would give nothing but black, foul-tasting fluid instead of water. The mystery deepened as the investigation continued. Her family arrived in LA to help with the disappearance. The story reached national headlines and then went worldwide. On February 19th, with the water problems in the hotel still unresolved, a lone hotel employee solved the disappearance of Elisa Lamb when he journeyed up to the hotel's roof and checked each one of the building's water tanks. Elisa had been found at last. But the mystery remains. No one was ever charged in the death of Elisa Lamb. No evidence of violence upon her still form. No drug paraphernalia was ever uncovered. With all of the modern magic of DNA and surveillance footage, the same nobody as we saw in the elevator footage turns up. Nothing. No clues to find. No answers to the mystery. You can look up her name and do a deep dive when you get home tonight. Put the light on, pull the covers up tight. Let the light of the computer reflect your fear, because in the end, the deep, dark night awaits us all. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. For turning the open sign off. Have the long arms do it. Okay.
Grab my glasses.
Oh, next up is Storm. So he's got to get his glasses on and papers all set up.
Otherwise, the words will be all blurry. I will simply start by saying that this takes place relatively close to here. It's not noted specifically in the pages, but it's a little bit further north and absolutely right on the coast. This is the Yule House experiment. By the winter of 1978, the house on Belmere Hill had been empty for so long that people stopped believing anyone had ever lived there at all. It stood above the northern coast like a silhouette carved out of midnight. Its roofline jagged saw against the bruised sky. Its windows blind and black. Its long stone steps strangled by frostbitten ivy. Storms found it first. Snow gathered there deepest. Wind lost its way around the corners and stayed, worrying the eaves, making the gutters mutter and the shutters tremble. You could stand at the base of the hill and feel, without any superstition at all, that the place did not sleep so much as it waited. Once it had a name, Vorick House, after the rail magnate who built it. Elias Vorick had filled it with polished wood and imported glass, with heavy carpets and delicate figurines, and a wife who died early, and 2 children who did not die early enough. On Christmas Eve, 1904, a blizzard sealed Belmer Hill in white. By morning, both of the children were found dead in the nursery, their bodies curled toward the window as if listening for carols that never came. The official word was exposure. Unofficially, no one talked about it at all. Vorick boarded the doors, barred the windows, dismissed the servants, and vanished from every readable record. His house did not. It remained intact and unrotted, watching the town grow and forget it. Locals said the house didn't want visitors. It wanted witnesses. So, of course, the Eastern Sleep Institute chose it for a study. They came up the drive 2 nights before Christmas, 7 of them, in parkas and knit caps, boots crunching the frozen gravel. Breath plumed in front of their faces, white and quick in the iron-cold air. Dr. Theodore Harland led the group, shoulders hunched, carrying a metal case full of forms and instruments. Behind him trudged Marjorie Bell, acoustic engineer, dragging a coil of cable like a dead snake and muttering about humidity. Paul Whitcomb and Lena Ivers walked together, 2 bright-eyed grad students in psychology trading theories about expectation bias. Robert Klein, the behavioral tech, smoked a cigarette down to the filter and stamped it in the snow at the foot of the stairs. Evelyn Shaw, the historian, took everything in with the distant, hungry expression of someone cataloging it for a book she'd already been started in her head. Daniel Mercer came last, carrying the portable recorder and a box of tapes. He paused once, halfway up the steps, to look up at the house. It looked back. That was the first impression he had, not a metaphor, but a sensation, that the dark panes of glass, blind for decades, were giving him a slow, measuring once over. By the time he blinked, the feeling was gone, carried off on a gust of wind that tasted like old soot. "Daniel," Harlan called, "you with us, or communing with the architecture?" "Just take it in," Daniel said as he hurried up the last few steps. The front door opened on the 3rd turn of a reluctant key. Cold air rolled out in a dry, breathless wave, sharper than the winter outside. Daniel felt it find his teeth and settle in his bones. The foyer lights came on with a stuttering hum as the generator at the rear of the property came to life. Yellow bulbs flickered into being overhead, revealing an interior that should have been sagging and broken with age, but was not. The staircase that rose from the foyer was grand, curling, an iron spine with polished wooden ribs. The wallpaper held its faded patterns. The chandeliers still hung like clusters of glass teeth. Dust lay thick as velvet on surfaces, but nothing had collapsed. Nothing had surrendered. "It's preserved," Evelyn murmured. "Time doesn't usually let buildings stay this proud." "Lucky for us," Harlan said. "We wanted atmosphere, didn't we?" They set about decorating the corpse. To evoke structured holiday nostalgia, the experiment required them to transform the main floor into a proper Christmas environment. Boxes of garlands, glass ornaments, strings of lights and tinsel were lugged in from the van and distributed like offerings throughout the house. Paul hammered a nail into an old beam to secure a swath of evergreen and paused, frowning. "What is it?" Lena said. "Wood's too soft," he said, "like it's wet." She touched the beam. The surface was dry and smooth beneath her fingers. Old varnish, old dust. "Feels fine to me." He shrugged and went back to his work. Still, every time he lifted the hammer, Daniel noticed the house seemed to flinch, just a little. Not physically, nothing so obvious, but there was something about the way the sound of each strike carried, as if the walls were bracing for it. By dusk, the tree stood in the main hall, a tall, conical monster of fir, broad at the base, its top brushing the ceiling like a supplicant reaching toward heaven. Glass baubles watched the room with bulging eyes. A garland of tinsel caught the light and threw it in quicksilver shivers across the walls. Fire roared in the grate. Marjorie had rigged the microphones in the hall, their thin black cords curling under rugs and alongside baseboards like veins fed back to the reel-to-reel deck Daniel had set on a side table. All right, Harlan said, consulting his clipboard. First ritual, carol sequence, 8 p.m. sharp. Traditional melodies only. Observe emotional and psychological response. Translation, Robert said. We sing some old songs and see who cries first. They gathered near the tree. The recorder wheels began to turn, tape whispering from one reel to the other. The first verse was hesitant, 7 voices trying to find the same path through a familiar tune. The second grew fuller, sound layering in the air. By the third, the acoustics of the halls were all wrong. Dashing through the snow, and one horse. The house held their voices too long. Notes stretched, bent, looped. An echo arrived, a heartbeat before the line it answered. A harmony that none of them were singing braided itself into the chords. Marjorie stopped. Did you hear that? Keep going, Harlan said, more briskly than the moment deserved. We need the bass line. They sang again. Now there were other voices, higher, lighter. Children. They danced at the edges of the sound, darting in and out of the auditory field, like fish, too quick to grasp, too clear to dismiss. When they finished, the last note did not so much fade as it got swallowed. Perfect, Harlan said, forcing a smile. See? Already interesting. At 9:12, while they were logging their impressions, Paul jerked his head toward the upstairs landing. Did you hear that? Hear what? Linus asked. Laughing. They all listened. The house gave them only the crackle of fire and the soft tick of selling wood. Probably your imagination, Harlan said, writing. That's data too. At 11:44, the temperature in the hall rose 12 degrees in under a minute. No one had touched the thermostat. No one had fueled the fire. They stayed up to set the dining table for the next phase of the study. 7 plates, 7 glasses, 7 sets of silverware, laid in clinical precision. At midnight, when Lena went to refill the water pitcher, she stopped. Did we do this? She asked. The others looked, somewhere between 11:50 and midnight, without anyone acknowledging the act. An 8th place had been set on the table. Plate, glass, fork, knife, spoon, napkin folded like a little cradle. Probably a prank, Robert said, though his voice wasn't convinced. Somebody trying to get in the mood? No one claimed it. They went to bed uneasy in strange rooms that smelled like stale perfume and old pine, and woke late, as if the house had reluctantly allowed it. Evelyn did not wake. They found her on the 2nd floor just after 9 when she failed to report to the morning briefing. The door they thought was a linen closet now opened into a small, perfect nursery, preserved in a bubble of air that smelled faintly of dust and talcum powder. Pale blue stags bounded across the wallpaper. A wooden rocking horse stared at the window with flaking eyes. Evelyn sat in the nursery closet, knees drawn up, one hand braced the floor, the other curled against her chest. Her eyes, wide open, filmed white. Her fingernails were gone, not torn, not broken, just absent. The soft pads of her fingers were smeared with gray, as if she was trying to claw through something that turned to powder under her touch. When Daniel reached out, dust puffed from her lips and nostrils. It was old dust. The smell of boxes untouched in attics for decades, of curtains that had turned to paper, of pages that might crumble if read. He staggered back, throat burning. Heart failure, Harlan said, too loudly over the rising panic. This is shock, all right? We stay calm, we mark it, we get her out. There are procedures. No one said what they were all thinking. The door had been locked from the inside, and Evelyn had not the key. They should have left. They didn't. Whether out of professional pride, stubbornness, or simple inertia of being too deep into something to climb back out, they followed the protocol. That night, the carols sounded different. They stood in the main hall again, beneath the chandelier's glass grin, and sang because the schedule told them to. The house did not wait politely this time. It joined in immediately. Children's voices from the walls, the ceiling, the dark spaces behind the plaster. Frosty the Snowman. Mark it, Harlan said through the teeth. Keep going! Forks moved by themselves at dinner. Food disappeared from untouched plates in small, greedy bites. Once Daniel felt a faint brush of something cold and weightless against his knuckles, as if a small hand were trying to take his wrist and guide it. At 9:31, the faint, bright jingle of bells drifted from the servants' corridor at the rear of the kitchen. We didn't bring any bells, Marjorie said. Robert, ever the one who couldn't resist a hallway, grabbed a flashlight. I'll check it out. Try not to get murdered while I'm gone. He vanished down the narrow passage. The echo of his footsteps went on too long, retreating into a distance that should never have existed in a house of this size. When he didn't return after 15 minutes, they went looking. The servant corridor stretched farther than it had that afternoon. It was wrong in small ways. The angle of the walls, the pitch of the floor, the way that the ceiling seemed to lean down, listening. Halfway down, the beam from Lena's flashlight picked out a set of footprints. They were sunk into the wooden planks as if the boards had been soft clay when Robert stepped there and then hardened around his feet. Each print showed the tread pattern in detail, toes pointed deeper into the corridor. No turning, no coming back. Maybe he found a way through, Harlan said. Through what? Lena asked. No one answered. They called his name until the house threw back echoes, thin and mocking. Robert Klein did not come back. The panic that had been building quietly since they found Evelyn began at last to show itself. It happened quickly after that. At 10:02, a scream sounded from the direction of the servants' staircase, a raw, tearing sound that sliced through conversation and drove everyone toward it at once. The staircase was a steep, narrow thing at the end of the corridor, led by a single bulb that seemed a long way up. As they reached the foot of it, the wooden steps heaved beneath a force none of them could see. The structure flexed, timbers groaning like ribs trying to breathe after being nailed shut. Paul! Lena shouted. Did you get up there? The scream came again from somewhere above, a human sound flayed by terror. Paul charged up the first 3 steps. On the 4th, the stairway folded. It didn't collapse like a rotten structure. It moved like a muscle, wood bent and met itself, like the gap at the center, closing like a mouth around a bite. For a heartbeat, Daniel saw Paul framed between the closing treads, eyes wide, reaching back. Then, he was gone. The steps sealed with a splintering crack. The hallway went quiet, save for the frantic rasp of their own breathing. Emergency exit, Harlan said, voice shaking. We still have the front doors, windows, we can... I swallowed hard. We can still go. Lena didn't wait. She spun and ran, shoes slipping on the polished floor, her breath thin, constant, no, as she tore through the foyer toward the main floors. Lena, stop! Wait, Daniel shouted. She seized the handles and flung open the doors. On the other side, there should have been iced over steps, the winding drive, the distant glow of the town below. Instead, there was snow. A corridor of falling snow, stretching forward into a whiteness that had no horizon. It did not appear to be outdoors, not entirely. The air beyond the threshold had weight and direction like water in a tunnel. Shapes moved in and out, just beyond clarity. Daniel thought of fish under ice. Lena stared. No, she whispered, no, I'm not. The wind reached through, took hold of her coat, and pulled. She grabbed the doorframe. Frost bloomed around her fingers, creeping fast, turning her knuckles bloodless. For a second, Daniel thought they might be able to reach her. Then her grip slipped on the building ice, and the snow swallowed her whole. The door slammed shut, hard enough to rattle the glass. Daniel stood there with his hand outstretched, the echo of her being pulled away, beating in his eardrums. That's it, Marjorie said. Her voice had a thin, high edge to it. High edge. It hadn't the day before. We're done! We're done, Harlan! You understand? There is no study. That's just a house eating us! Harlan began. Light flickered overhead. The bulbs in the chandelier buzzed and flared, then steadied, brighter than before. The garlands along the stair rail shivered, as if brushed by invisible arms. Tinsel trembled, throwing sparks of reflected light across the walls. Somewhere above them, a door creaked itself open. The sound of children's voices slipped down the stairwell, excited, breathless, overlapping. Let us finish, they sang, not quite in words, but meaning was there. Let us finish Christmas. The eighth place at the table waited patiently in the hall, its glass catching the light like a watching eye. Move, Harlan said. We need to get to a window. Any window. Break it if we have to. We can. Marjorie had already started for the staircase, meaning to cut across and reach the upper landing where the long row of front windows stood. The banister under her hand was smooth, worn by hands long gone. It wrapped around her wrist like a living thing. She had one instant to scream before the carved wood twisted with obscene flexibility, dragging her sideways, flinging her into the hollow center of the staircase. Her body hit the underside of the second floor landing with a wet, cracking sound and dropped out of sight. Harlan bolted for the nearest front window. It stood tall and immaculate, glass clouded faintly with condensation on the inside. He didn't bother with a chair this time. He simply drove his elbow into it hard. The glass did not shatter. It accepted the blow as if it were water, the surface dimpling to take his arm in, up to the shoulder. He jerked backwards and could not move. The glass clung, thick and clear, around his flesh. Help me, he said, voice breaking. Help! The house took him in, small, slow increments, drawing him forward, ribs compressing under the frame as if the window had decided to try to wear him. His scream stretched tiny and thin as his head passed through and then cut off. The glass smoothed over behind him, leaving not a crack. There was only one left now. Daniel stood in the ruin of the foyer, chest heaving, the recorder still humming on the side table as if none of this were outside its brief. The house hummed with warmth, the air thick and almost humid. Ornaments drooped on their hooks. Wax from the candles on the mantel ran in glistening, fleshy rivulets and pooled like congealing fat. Don't, he whispered to himself, don't call my name. Don't say I'm next. Don't give it the satisfaction. Somewhere above, a lullaby began. Soft, sweet, sung in voices that overlapped and braided together into something like a hymn and something like a prayer. And now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. Daniel did not know where he was going until he was already running. He took the stairs 2 and 3 at a time, dodging splinters, following a pole that felt like a choice and more like a current. The house twisted around him as he climbed, hallways stretching and contracting, doors opening into rooms that replayed fragments of other winters, wrapping papers strewn like flayed skin, candles burning down past safety, a tree toppling in a corner, the sound of someone weeping in a bedroom they couldn't bear to leave. Hands pressed outward from the walls as he passed, small palms, fingers splayed, the wallpaper straining but not quite tearing. Breath fogged from the keyholes. Footprints appeared on the ceiling overhead, running rapidly away. At the very center of it all, where the house's bones converged, a chimney rose. It was wide enough for a man, blackened from countless fires, warm even now. Heat rolled out of it in slow exhalations, tasting of ash and resin and something else, spice and sugar and the metallic tang of burned offerings. Daniel stared up into the darkness and knew with certainty that bypassed thought that this was the throat. He did not climb, he was taken. An invisible force seized him under his arms, not cruel, not rough, but inexorable. His feet left the floor. The bricks slid past his shoulders, his back, his boots, scraping but not bruising, the space miraculously wide enough where it needed to be. For a moment, he had a sick, unmistakable impression of being welcomed, of being drawn upward like a child lifted from the cradle. Below him, the house began to sing. He was taken all the way up to the roof. There he could see from the windows a glow. It wasn't fire because the flames didn't burst through it, but they continued to glow, and the house began to bellow and gurgle, and it was coming inward and inward. It was an implosion that continued as he stood there, and it was starting to go black. And as it did, he had this unnerving carol that ended in this guttural thing. The most wonderful time of the year. And it went black. They found him at the tree line at dawn, half bruised in the snow, clothes scorched but intact, skin unburned. His hair smelled like smoke and pine and something that made the rescue workers uncomfortable, though they couldn't have said what. He woke in a hospital bed 3 days later with his throat raw and his voice reduced to a hoarse whisper that never quite recovered. When they asked him what happened up there, he tried to explain. It wasn't killing us, Daniel said. That's not the right word. The man from the Institute leaned forward. The others are dead, Mr. Mercer. I know, Daniel said. I watched it. I felt it. But that's not what it wanted. Well, then what did it want? He stared at the ceiling, listening for carols that might never stop hearing. They were trying to finish Christmas, he whispered. They never got to finish. The kids. Vorik's kids. It was all waiting. All these years, it was waiting for someone who would come in and do it properly. Decorations, carols, dinner, laughter. That's what woke it up. You think the house is haunted by children? He almost laughed. The sound came out rough and joyless. No, not haunted, inhabited. They learned the shape of the house from the inside. They learned how to move it, how to use it, and how... He swallowed hard. His tongue tasted like ash. Now they know how to do it. Now they know how Christmas goes. The tapes from the Belmere house were sealed. The remains of the house, such as they were entombed in concrete. The hill was declared unstable, off limits to hikers and thrill seekers. Just another piece of land the state meant to forget. December, however, did not forget. Most of the stories you'll hear around that part of the coast are just that, stories. Kids daring one another to climb the fence, couples necking in parked cars, swearing they saw lights where no house stood anymore. But every once in a while, when the snow is falling hard and the town below is wrapped in its own glittering rituals, odd things happen on the edges. A warm breeze ghosting through an alley in the middle of a blizzard, carrying the faint sound of children singing. A cluster of footprints appearing overnight on a porch where no one had walked, small and bare, circling once and then gone. Lights flickering deep between the pines on Gilmore Hill in colors too steady and organized to be lighting. And some families, just past midnight on Christmas Eve, open their doors to bring in a forgotten package or take the dog out and find something waiting, a plate, a glass, a neatly folded napkin set with care. An empty place laid out as if for a child who has been waiting late for dinner for a very, very long time. If they clear it away, nothing happens. If they leave it there, sometimes, just sometimes, they wake in the night to the sound of small hands clapping into light and the soft, unmistakable crackle of wrapping paper from a room that used to be their own. Because a house on a hill learned how, as the story goes, and something inside it, something that used to be children, is still trying to get Christmas right.
I'll take that, thank you.
I think I missed it.
All right, thank you, Storm. And finally, we are referring to him as the headliner. We have Peter H. Gilmore.
It's just a memorization. I want this,
That's probably close enough. And now, a reading from the book of H.P. Lovecraft's complete fiction. This is a tale called The Festival. It was written in about 1923. He begins with a quotation by Lactantius, who was an early Christian who worked with Constantine when they were trying to form the religion that would make an evil empire in about the 300-somethings. Efficiunt daemones et quae non sunt, sic tamen casi sint, conspicienda omnibus exhibeant. Now, he was a demonologist, and that essentially means that demons will make you see things that really aren't what they are. I was far from home, and the spell of the eastern sea was upon me. In the twilight, I heard it pounding on the rocks, and I knew it lay just over the hill where the twisting willows writhed against the clearing sky and the first stars of the evening. And because my fathers had called me to the old town beyond, I pushed on through the shallow, new-fallen snow along the road that soared lonely up to where Aldebaran twinkled amongst the trees, on towards the very ancient town I had never seen but often dreamed of. It was the Yule tide, that men call Christmas, though they know in their hearts it is older than Bethlehem and Babylon, older than Memphis and mankind. It was the Yule tide, and I had come at last, the ancient sea town where my people had dwelt and kept festival in the elder time, when festival was forbidden. Where also they had commanded their sons to keep festival once every century, that the memory of primal secrets might not be forgotten. Mine were an old people, and were old even when this land was settled 300 years before, and they were strange, because they had come as dark, furtive folk from opiate southern gardens of orchids, and spoken another tongue before they learned the tongue of the blue-eyed fishers. And now they were scattered, and shared only the rituals of mysteries that none living could understand. I was the only one who came back that night to the old fishing town, as legend bade, for only the poor and the lonely remember. Then beyond the hill's crest I saw Kingsport, outspread frostily in the gloaming, snowy Kingsport with its ancient vanes and steeples, ridgepoles and chimney pots, wharves and small bridges, willow trees and graveyards, endless labyrinths of steep, narrow, crooked streets, and dizzy church-crowned central peak that time durst not touch. Ceaseless mazes of colonial houses piled and scattered at all angles and levels, like a child's discarded blocks. Antiquity hovering on gray wings over winter-whited gables and gambrel roofs. Fanlights and small-paned windows, one by one, gleaming out in the cold dusk to join Orion and the archaic stars. And against the rotting wharves, the sea pounded, the secretive, immemorial sea out of which the people had come in the elder time. Beside the road at its crest, a still higher summit rose, bleak and wind-swept, and I saw that it was a burying ground where black gravestones stuck ghoulishly through the snow like decayed fingers of a gigantic corpse. The printless road was very lonely, and sometimes I thought I heard a distant, horrible creaking as of a gibbet in the wind. They had hanged 4 kinsmen of mine for witchcraft in 1692, but you do not know just where. As the road wound down the seaward slope, I listened for the merry sounds of a village at evening, but did not hear them. When I thought of the season and felt that these old Puritan folk might well have Christmas customs strange to me and full of silent hearthside prayer. So after that, I did not listen for merriment or look for wayfarers, but kept on down past the hushed lighted farmhouses and shadowy stone walls, and the grotesque knockers of pillared doorways listened along deserted, unpaved lanes in the little light, curtained windows. I had seen maps of the town and knew where to find the home of my people. It was told that I should be known and welcomed, for village legend lives long. So I hastened through Back Street to Circle Court and across the fresh snow on the one full flagstone pavement in the town, to where Green Lane leads off behind the market house. The old maps still held good, and I had no trouble, though at Arkham they must have lied when they said that the trolleys ran to this place, since I saw not a wire overhead. Snow would have hid the rails in any case. I was glad I had chosen to walk, for the white village had seemed very beautiful from the hill, and now I was eager to knock at the door of my people, the 7th house on the left in Green Lane, with an ancient peaked roof and jutting second story, all built before 1650. There were lights inside the house when I came upon it, and I saw from the diamond window panes that it must have kept very close to its antique state. The upper part overhung the narrow grass-grown street and nearly met the overhanging part of the opposite, so that it was almost in a tunnel, with the low stone doorstep wholly free from snow. There was no sidewalk, but many houses had high doors reached by double flights of steps with iron railings. It was an odd scene, and because I was strange to New England, I had never known its like before. Though it pleased me, I would have relished it better if there had been footprints in the snow and people in the streets and a few windows without drawn curtains. When I sounded the archaic iron knocker, I was half afraid. Some fear had been gathering in me, perhaps because of the strangeness of my heritage and the bleakness of the evening and the queerness of the silence in that aged town of curious customs. When my knock was answered, I was fully afraid, because I had not heard any footsteps before the door creaked open. But I was not afraid long, for the gowned, slippered old man in the doorway had a bland face that reassured me, and though he made signs that he was dumb, he wrote a quaint and ancient welcome with the stylus and wax tablet he carried. He beckoned me into a low, candlelit room with massive exposed rafters and dark, stiff, sparse furniture of the 17th century. The past was vivid there, for not an attribute was missing. There was a cavernous fireplace and a spinning wheel, at which a bent old woman in loose wrapper and deep-poked bonnet sat back towards me, silently spinning despite the festive season. An indefinite dampness seemed upon the place, and I marveled that no fire should be blazing. The high-backed settle faced the row of curtained windows at the left, and seemed to be occupied, though I was not sure. I did not like everything about what I saw, and felt again the fear I had had. The fear grew stronger from what had before lessened it, for the more I looked at the old man's bland face, the more its very blandness terrified me. The eyes never moved, and the skin was too like wax. Finally, I was sure it was not a face at all, but a fiendishly cunning mask. But the flabby hands, curiously gloved, wrote genially on the tablet and told me I must wait a while before I could be led to the place of festival. Pointing to a chair, table, and pile of books, the old man now left the room. And when I sat down to read, I saw that the books were hoary and moldy, that they included old Maurister's wild Marvels of Science, the terrible Seducimus Triumphatus of Joseph Glanville, published in 1681, the shocking Demonolatria of Remigius, printed in 1595 at Lyon, and worst of all, of course, the unmentionable Necronomicon of the mad Arab Abdul Hazred in Olaus Wormius' forbidden Latin translation. A book which I had never seen, but of which I had heard monstrous things whispered. No one spoke to me, but I could hear the creaking of signs in the wind outside, the whir of the wheel as the bonneted old woman continued her silent spinning. I thought the room and the books, the people very morbid and disquieting, but because an old tradition of my father's had summoned me to strange feastings, I resolved to expect queer things. So I tried to read, and soon became tremblingly absorbed by something I found in that accursed Necronomicon, a thought and a legend too hideous for sanity or consciousness. But I disliked it when I fancied I heard the closing of one of the windows that faced the settle, as if it had been stealthily opened. Uh-oh. There you go.
I don't cute.
It had seemed to follow a whirring that was not of the old woman's spinning wheel. This was not much, though, for the old woman was spinning very hard, and the aged clock had been striking. After that, I lost the feeling that there were persons on the settle, and was reading intently and shudderingly, when the old man came back, booted and dressed in a loose antique costume, and we sat down on that very bench, so that I could not see him. It was certainly nervous wanting, and the blasphemous book in my hands made it doubly so. When 11 struck, however, the old man stood up, glided to a massive carved chest in the corner, and got 2 hooded cloaks, one of which he donned, and the other of which he draped around the old woman. She was ceasing her monotonous spinning. Then they both started for the outer door, the woman lamely creeping, and the old man, after picking up the very book I had been reading, beckoning me as he drew his hood over that unmoving face or mask. We went out into the moonless and tortuous network of that incredibly ancient town. Went out as the lights in the curtained windows disappeared one by one, and the dog star leered at the throng of cowled, cloaked figures that poured silently from every doorway and formed monstrous processions up this street and that, past the creaking signs and antediluvian gables, the thatched roofs and diamond-paned windows, threading precipitous lanes where decaying houses overlapped and crumbled together, gliding across open courts and churchyards where the bobbing lanterns made eldritch drunken constellations. Amid these hushed throngs, I followed my voiceless guides, jostled by elbows that seemed preternaturally soft, and pressed by chests and stomachs that seemed abnormally pulpy. But seeing never a face and hearing never a word, up, an eerie column slithered, and I saw that all the travelers were converging as they flowed near a sort of focus of crazy alleys at the top of the high hill in the center of the town, where perched a great white church. I had seen it from the road's crest when I looked at Kingsport in the new dusk, and it had made me shiver because Aldebaran had seemed to balance itself for a moment at the top of the ghostly spire. There was an open space around the church, partly a churchyard with spectral shafts, and partly a half-paved square, swept nearly bare of snow by the wind, and lined with unwholesomely archaic houses, having peaked roofs and overhanging gables. Death fires danced over the tombs, revealing gruesome vistas, though queerly failing to cast any shadows. Past the churchyard, where there were no houses, I could see over the hill's summit and watch the glimmer of stars on the harbor, though the town was invisible in the dark. Only once in a while a lantern bobbled horribly through serpentine alleys on its way to overtake the throng that was now slipping speechlessly into the church. I waited till the crowd had oozed into the black doorway, until all the stragglers had followed. The old man was pulling at my sleeve, but I determined to be the last. Well, don't want to go before them. Then I finally went, the sinister man and the old spinning woman before me, crossing the threshold into that swarming temple of unknown darkness. I took once to look at the outside world, as the churchyard phosphorescent cast a sickly glow on the hilltop pavement. As I did so, I shuddered, for though the wind had not left much snow, a few patches did remain on the path near the door, and in that fleeting backward look, it seemed to my troubled eyes that they bore no mark of passing feet, not even mine. The church was scarce lit by all the lanterns that had entered it, for most of the throng had already vanished. They'd streamed up the aisle, between the high white pews to the trap door of the vaults, which yawned loathsomely open just before the pulpit, and were now squirming noiselessly in. I followed dumbly down the foot-worn steps into the dark, suffocating crypt. The tale of that sinuous line of night marchers seemed very horrible. As I saw them wriggling into a venerable tomb, they seemed more horrible still. Then I noticed that the tomb's floor had an aperture down which the throng was sliding. And in a moment, we were all descending an ominous staircase of rough-hewn stone, a narrow spiral staircase, damp and particularly odorous, that wound endlessly down into the bowels of the hill, past monotonous walls of dripping stone blocks and crumbling mortar. It was a silent, shocking descent, and I observed after a horrible interval the walls and steps were changing in nature as if chiseled out of solid rock. What mainly troubled me was that the myriad footfalls made no sound and set up no echoes. After more aeons of descent, I saw some side passages or burrows leading from unknown recesses of blackness through the shaft of nighted mystery. Soon they became excessively numerous, like impious catacombs of nameless men, and their pungent odor of decay grew quite unbearable. I knew we must have passed down through the mountain and beneath the earth of Kingsport itself, and I shivered that a town should be so aged and maggoty with subterraneous evil. Then I saw the lurid shimmering of pale light and heard the insidious lapping of sunless waters. Again I shivered, for I did not like the things that the night had brought, and wished bitterly that no forefather had summoned me to this primal rite. As the steps in the passage grew broader, I heard another sound, the thin, whining mockery of a feeble flute. And suddenly there spread out before me the boundless vista of an inner world, a vast fungus shore lit by a belching column of sick greenish flame and washed by a wide, oily river that flowed from abysses frightful and unsuspected to join the blackest gulfs of immemorial ocean. Fainting and gasping, I looked at that unhallowed Erebus of Titan toadstools, leprous fire and slimy water, and saw the cloaked throngs forming a semicircle round the blazing pillar. It was Yule rite, older than man and fated to survive. The primal rite of the solstice and of spring's promise beyond the snows, the rite of fire and evergreen light and music. And in the Stygian grotto, I saw them do the rite and adore that sick pillar of flame, and throw into the water handfuls gouged out of the viscous vegetation which glittered green in the chlorotic glare. I saw this, and I saw something amorphously squatted far away from the light, piping noisomely on a flute. And as the thing piped, I thought I heard a noxious, muffled flutterings in the fetid darkness where I could not see. But what frightened me most was that flaming column, spouting volcanically from depths profound and inconceivable, casting no shadows as healthy flame should, and coating the nitrous stone above with a nasty, venomous verdigris. For in all that seething combustion, no warmth lay, but only clamminess of death, corruption. The man who had brought me now squirmed to a point directly beside the hideous flame and made stiff ceremonial motions to the semicircle he faced. At certain stages of the ritual, they did groveling obeisance, especially when he held above his head that abhorrent Necronomicon he had taken with him. And I shared all the obeisances because I had been summoned to this festival of the writings of my forefathers. Then the old man made a signal to the half-seen flute player in the darkness, which player thereupon changed its feeble drone to a scarce louder drone in another key, precipitating as it did so a horror unthinkable and unexpected. At this horror, I nearly sank to the lichened earth, transfixed with a dread not of this nor any world, but only of the mad spaces between the stars. Out of the unimaginable blackness beyond the gangrenous glare of that cold flame, out of the Tartarian leagues through which oily river rolled uncannily, unheard and unsuspected, there flopped rhythmically a horde of tame, trained, hybrid winged things that no sound eye could ever wholly grasp, or sound brain ever wholly remember. They were not altogether crows, nor moles, nor buzzards, nor ants, nor vampire bats, nor decomposed human beings, but something I cannot and must not recall. They flopped limply along, half with their webbed feet and half with their membranous wings, and as they reached the throng of celebrants, the cowled figures seized and mounted them, and rode off one by one along the reaches of that unlighted river into pits and galleries of panic, where poison springs feed frightful and undiscovered cataracts. The old spinning woman had gone with the throng, and the old man remained only because I had refused when he motioned to me to seize an animal and ride like the rest. I saw when I staggered to my feet that the amorphous flute player had rolled out of sight, but that two of the beasts were patiently standing by. As I hung back, the old man produced his stylus and tablet and wrote that he was the true deputy of my fathers, who had founded the Yule worship in this ancient place, that it had been decreed I should come back, and that the most secret mysteries were yet to be performed. He wrote this in a very ancient hand, and when I still hesitated to be pulled loose, he pulled loose from his robe a seal ring and a watch, both with my family arms, to prove that he was what he said. But it was a hideous proof, because I knew from old papers that that watch had been buried with my great-great-great-great-grandfather in 1698. Presently, the old man drew back his hood and pointed to the family resemblance in his face, but I only shuddered because I was sure that the face was merely a devilish waxen mask. The flopping animals were now scratching restlessly at the lichens, and I saw that the old man was nearly as restless himself. When one of the things began to waddle and edge away, he turned quickly to stop it. The suddenness of his motion dislodged that waxen mask, which should have been his head. And then, because that nightmare's position barred me from the stone staircase down which we had come, I flung myself into the oily underground river that bubbled somewhere to the caves of the sea, flung myself into that putrescent juice of earth's inner horrors before the madness of my screams could bring down upon me all the charnel legions these pest gulfs might conceal. At the hospital, they told me I had been found half frozen in Kingsport Harbor at dawn, clinging to the drifting spar that accident sent to save me. They told me I had taken the wrong fork of the hill road the night before and fallen over the cliffs at Orange Point, a thing they deduced from prints found in the snow, they said. There was nothing I could say, because everything was wrong. Everything was wrong with the broad window showing a sea of roofs in which only about 1 in 5 was ancient, and the sound of trolleys and motors in the streets below. They insisted this was Kingsport. I could not deny it. When I went delirious at hearing that the hospital stood near the old churchyard on Central Hill, they sent me to St. Mary's Hospital in Arkham, where I could have even better care. I liked it there, for the doctors were broad-minded and even lent me their influence in obtaining the carefully sheltered copy of Alhazred's Objectional Necronomicon from the library. Such nice doctors. They said something about a psychosis, and I agreed I'd better get any harassing obsessions off my mind. So I read again that hideous chapter and shuddered doubly because it was indeed not new to me. I had seen it before. Let footprints tell what they might, and where it was I had seen it were best forgotten. There was no one, in waking hours, who could remind me of it, but my dreams are filled with terror because of phrases I dare not quote. I dare quote only one paragraph, put into such English as I can make from the awkward Low Latin. Quoting from the evil tome, "The nethermost caverns," wrote the mad Arab, "are not for the fathoming of the eyes that see, for the marvels are strange and terrific. Cursed the ground where dead thoughts live new and oddly bodied, and evil the mind that is held by no head. Wisely did Ibn Shahabo say that happy is the tomb where no wizard hath lain, and happy the town at night whose wizards are all ashes. For it is of old rumor that the soul of the devil bought hastes not from his charnel clay, but fats and instructs the very worm that gnaws, till out of corruption horrid life springs, and the dull scavengers of earth wax crafty to vex it, and swell monstrous to plague it. Great holes secretly are digged where earth's pores ought to suffice, and things have learned to walk that ought to crawl." Thank you.
In your best Karloff voice.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. Okay, that concludes our, what do we call this night?
A night of Hexmas ghost stories.
Yes.